£30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. Will Britain explode into a night of rioting? Our reporter Charlie Peters is in Aldershot, where police feared that there'd be trouble, and it does look as though tensions are rising. And
it's complete nonsense, because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
The Met Chief thinks two-tier policing is nonsense, but...
Salam alaikum. Good morning, everyone.
I'm sorry, but is this really British police in Britain?
You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8
Akbar
mandates?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested or...
Robert Jenrick is being called Islamophobic for this, but he hit back with this clip. Also tonight...
For you coming to us from the Supreme Court this afternoon, Shamima Begum has lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship.
Ah, but has she? Because will Shamima Begum use the ECHR to get back into Britain? On my panel tonight is the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Oh, yes, and can you guess what happens next here? Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Tinderbox Britain holds its breath. Next.
Good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 9 o'clock. Your headlines. Thousands of counter-protesters have taken to the streets across England as police brace for further unrest. Hundreds of counter-protesters have gathered in Hackney, Liverpool and Rotherham, whilst they've also been reported in Walthamstow, Bristol and Birmingham and Aldershot. Thousands of specialist officers are braced to respond, and prosecutors are considering whether to apply terrorism charges. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has thanked all police officers for their work tonight to protect and support local communities. It comes as at least 12 individuals have been convicted for their part in the ongoing disorder. Speaking earlier, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, said there's no excuse for thuggery.
I know that the public will be feeling anxious about the reports of potential more unrest tonight, but the police will be there to respond to any violence and criminality that we see on our streets. There's no place for that on our UK streets, and the police will do their job like they have done exceptionally well under very difficult circumstances like I've seen here and witnessed today what they faced, missiles being thrown at them and attacks, but the police will be there to keep the public safe, and there's no excuse for thuggery and criminality on the streets.
It comes as the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, dismissed accusations of two-tier policing, calling it complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued that last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if ethnic minorities were involved. Meanwhile, the coroner says it's impossible to articulate the lifelong effects of the stabbing attack in Southport. Inquests into the deaths of 6-year-old BB King, Alistair Silva Aguiar, who was 9, and 7-year-old Elsie Stankum have been opened and adjourned. 17-year-old Axel Ruda Cubana will stand trial next year after being charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder. And Shamima Begum's lawyers could take her case to the European Court of Human Rights after she lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship. She'd originally had her passport removed after joining so-called Islamic State as a teenager in 2015. A judge has ruled she can't bring the case to court again, suggesting it could be argued the 24-year-old had been the author of her own misfortune. Following the ruling, Miss Begum's lawyers said they will take every possible legal step on her behalf, including a petition to Strasbourg. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
All week, the public have been pumped full of fear about racist far-right riots. So far, we've got this. It basically just appears to be counter-protesters. Shops and immigration services did board up their windows anyway, though. And earlier today, Met Police Chief Mark Rowley said this.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
But then a West Midlands police officer basically admitted to it.
We knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like. And so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
Even given there were so many of them clearly armed, I mean, would you do the same if it was an EDL type situation?
What I would say is that the vast majority of people that attended that protest yesterday did so law-abidingly, and they did it with the right intentions.
OK, and then we saw police officers doing stuff like this.
Salam alaikum. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the leaders and elders that have afforded me this opportunity to speak to you personally. The police are equipped, we're well trained, and we very much will be directly dealing with any of that sort of issue on behalf of everyone that lives in the West Midlands. Shukran.
Indeed. This has been a big test for Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper. The Home Secretary does seem a little bit out of her depth.
When you asked the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire why there was no exclusion zone around that asylum-seeking hotel because it was publicised 48 hours in advance, what was the response?
Well, those operational decisions are for police forces.
No, I understand that, Home Secretary,
also,
but when you saw that, and you'll be aware that that demo was promoted 48 hours in advance, why was there no exclusion zone around that hotel? How did the Chief Constable respond to that question, or have you not asked?
So the South Yorkshire Police did deploy additional police officers to the hotel.
And the latest polling shows 49% of the public think the Prime Minister is handling this situation badly. Well, we can go live now to Aldershot, where our reporter Charlie Peters is on the scene where there were fears of violent clashes. Charlie, we're seeing elsewhere in the country that as night falls, tensions do seem to be mounting. What's it like where you are?
Well, there are shops boarded up here in Aldershot ahead of what you were describing, those rumours of anti-immigration protests turning up. They never happened in the town centre, but a counter-demonstration has gone ahead. I'm stood here in the police line where they're gathering each side of the road here. The counter-demonstration from Stand Up to Racism against the protest that didn't happen. And the local people on both sides, but some local people on this side have turned up to demonstrate against that Stand Up to Racism protest. Two very strong perspectives here, anti-immigration, anti-small boats, but also people on the other side calling them Nazi scum, saying that they need to get off the streets.
OK, Charlie, look, thank you very, very much, and do stay safe as well. We'll be going to Charlie Peters throughout the course of the show. Look, let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. It's the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. We've got businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and we're also joined as well by author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Mark, you know, we're going to be playing some clips as we talk of some of the incidents that we've seen so far tonight. I think it's fair to say, just from what we're seeing coming out on social media, that as night falls, things do seem to be getting a little bit testier, but there hasn't been nothing like the full-scale riots that we were maybe anticipating. When you look, though, at surveys here, a poll that Keir Starmer, 49% of people think he's handling this badly, and you see Yvette Cooper there, you know, kind of floundering a bit on Nick Ferrari. Have Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper lost control of this?
Have they lost control of it? I don't know, but they do seem to be floundering at best, I would say. I think that they, unfortunately, if you like, over-politicised it. I think there is a problem with far-right groups being activated and mobilising, but that's not the entirety of the problem. We've got a much deeper underlying problem that the Labour government seem unwilling to address or admit. Vast swathes of the country who feel totally disenfranchised and disillusioned. And, of course, that's the sort of petri dish in which far-right activities and bricks being thrown through windows can emerge. Not that I condone, obviously, a single second of it. So let's hope tonight, Patrick, that it starts to calm down. The night's young. We'll obviously see over the coming hours. But thus far, it seems a little bit more peaceful than we might have feared. But I don't think the government really has a full grip yet.
No, indeed. People have turned out in large numbers, Adam, these counter-protests, the standards to racism. One thing that's Brighton. If you're watching us on television at the moment, that's Brighton. Well, there was a minor flashpoint before, actually, when I think a couple of lads turned up, whether they were, you know, quotes-unquote far right. I mean, no one really knows, but certainly they were all being shouted at as Nazis, and the police got hold of them and took them away quite quickly. But that has really kind of been about the extent of it so far. Yeah, I will slightly push back. There's a lot of things going around on the BBC and Sky News at the moment. I was seeing before I came in about these anti-racism protests. OK, fine, you could call them anti-racism protests. I'll be honest with you, from what I'm hearing from people on the ground now, quite a lot of them appear to have morphed into pro-Palestine protests, actually. But Adam, have Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper lost control of the situation?
Look, I've been talking about the dangers on our streets for years now. I see it. I've seen it, local gangs and things. And this is just a follow-on from that. You have got people now on our streets on both sides that just needed an excuse to come and cause mayhem. We also see in Southend last week a machete fight in front of police officers. I don't know another country that would tolerate that. I've just come back from Spain. Can you imagine people doing that in front of Spanish police? I can't tell you what would happen to them. Now, I feel like the public look at our police as weak, and some of these, you know, unscrupulous people are now playing on that weakness.
Yeah.
And what the two comments that interviews I see from Yvette Cooper, one from the Hare Hills riot, and then after the Southport. Her rhetoric is so different, and that really plays into the distrust of people. People are not thinking that this is being policed the same,
well, that's
and that angers a lot.
That's a good point, because we played a couple of clips there. Mark Rowley, who is parroting what Keir Starmer is saying, which is the two-tier policing is nonsense. And then, Rebecca, you know, we have this clip that emerges from today in Guildford, I believe it was, where there's a police officer there who's not so bothered about the fact necessarily it's a salam alaikum at the start of it, whatever, right? But it's the idea that he's thanking community leaders and elders for giving him, a police officer, the opportunity to talk to members of that community. Could we just play the first snippet of that again? Is that all right?
Salam alaikum. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the leaders and elders that have afforded me this opportunity to speak to you personally.
All right. I mean, Rebecca, that's a bit two-tier, isn't it? What's going on there?
I don't think it's two-tier, and I think this two-tier thing is a bit of a sideshow because people don't want to accept that representatives of their side of the political spectrum have behaved very poorly. Now, the best comparison we've got is the London 2011 riots. That's the clearest comparison we have. That was predominantly young black men who were involved in that. Now, the rates of arrest, very, very similar to each individual incident. The rates of conviction, I imagine, will be very, very similar. Keir Starmer led that. He was head of the prosecution on that. He's obviously functionally going to be leading on this one, and I think he will throw the book at people in the exact same way. And actually, David Cameron was polling at 30% approval on the London 2011 riots at the exact same point in the narrative. So he was actually polling slightly worse, though he had been in power for longer. So comparatively, I don't think there's any suggestion meaningfully of two-tier policing.
Do you think... Well, I'll throw the same question to you, really, Mark, on this. You know, is there a perception, do you think, that the public are being lied to about two-tier policing, you know, by the people who are right at the top? Because you play those clips of Mark Rowley side by side to the individual there who's, who's thanking elders of a Muslim community for the opportunity for letting him talk to them. Well, what is that?
Well, that is quite weird, isn't it? It suggests that there are gatekeepers preventing the police addressing members of the public directly. Now, what I think we need to be careful about, and I appreciate we have to do it in fast-moving 24/7 news environments, but it's sort of comparing one 3-second clip with another 3-second clip. My fear is this whole thing goes back a long, long, long way. All the way back to, say, the Rotherham child abuse sex scandal. OK, well, you can't blame Mark Rowley for that, but a sort of sense that this wasn't dealt with or investigated because of sort of political correctness. I think it was unwise for any police to be involved in taking the knee around the time of Black Lives Matter. Unwise to do that. Not obviously heinous, just unwise. And, I was told earlier today that in Police Scotland give you a day off as a policeman or woman if you want to join the gay pride marches and events. Again, what's all that about? So I think you've got to build up over years of people actually questioning, to Adam's point, has policing been effective at all? It must be effective. And is it scrupulously even-handed? And it mustn't just be scrupulously even-handed, it needs to be seen as that as well. And all of that confidence has frayed, and what that means is the social fabric of Britain at the moment is fraying badly as well. It's a serious problem, and I think just saying it's complete nonsense doesn't really get to the bottom of it. The mere fact that a large number of people believe there's two-tier policing needs to be addressed, because we really need to get that nailed.
Let me just see how a lot of people I've spoken to over the last week have said the same. They saw clips on the media and on social media of police running away in the Hare Hills riots. They then see clips of police dogs biting rioters in Southport and using their batons and going in strong. Now, that's undeniable that they were policed in two different situations, but they seemingly, from the clips that we've seen and the media reporting, they were policed differently. Now, but in my opinion, all rioters should face the baton and, get chased out and get arrested. It's indefensible, but we need to see it even-handed across.
But the slight problem here, Adam, isn't it, that maybe that's the case, again, at first blush, at first glance. But clearly, in different scenarios, the police will, make a decision about, oh, my God, are we completely overwhelmed here, and therefore do we need to flee? Or can we contain this because we can actually...
The optics are not good.
No, the optics are terrible.
Over the space of the last 2 weeks, the optics are really bad for the police.
OK. Look, I'm going to tease ahead slightly to what we're going to be doing at the 10 p.m, where we're going to be having a bigger discussion about, really, does this issue, regardless of what happens tonight, and look, I'm not saying everything's been perfect tonight, it's not, and there is, from what we are seeing, certainly a slight escalation, I would say, in the last hour or so. Real, genuine potential for it to escalate and get worse this evening, but so far we've not had anything like the kind of full-scale riots that people were maybe predicting. But, Rebecca, I don't think this goes away, this issue, now. Whether we have these full-blown riots that people are maybe predicting in the coming hours or something, I do not think that if we don't have that, Labour can say, right, this is the problem sorted now.
No, of course not, but you don't negotiate with terrorists, and a lot of this is functionally right-wing domestic terrorism, so this isn't the moment to have the conversation. First of all, you've got to calm things down, because at the moment, nobody is listening and nobody wants to listen. People are too angry. So first of all, you have to tackle the immediate problem, and then you have to look at the cause. And I do think there is unhappiness and distrust in this country. Just as when the BLM demonstrations were happening, we needed to look at why do black people in this country feel a certain way. We also need to ask why white people feel a certain way, but this isn't the moment to do it.
Look, thank you for the start on this show. I do actually just want to play a little clip for you, if we possibly can, which is, I think, something that's really quite concerning, actually. What we've got going on at the moment in the streets is, bad. Obviously it is, of course it is. I worry that there's going to be a rush for authoritarianism and, frankly, totalitarianism from the government, from police forces. There's a clip here that I want you to listen to now, and we'll just have a quick reaction off the back of it.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Stephen Parkinson there is Director of Public Prosecutions. I think there's some very alarming things in there. So what, are we policing tweets now in a way that we don't necessarily need to? If someone retweets something of something that's actually happening, is that going to impact journalists? Is that going to impact ordinary people? I think there are alarm bells ringing there, and we will talk about that later on in the show. But coming up in the next hour, we'll bring you the latest from the streets. Yes, Tinderbox Britain continues to be simmering away, doesn't it? Plus, some have branded this interview with Farage, well, controversial.
One of the reasons the Southport riots were as bad as they were is we weren't told the truth.
OK. Does the Reform UK leader have any part to play in the chaos engulfing Britain's streets? Some people think so. Lee Anderson is on. He's live in the studio very, very shortly to answer that. He's his fellow Reform MP. But next, as the government scraps the Tories' British Homes for British Workers plan, should UK nationals be prioritised for social housing? We're going head-to-head on this. Former Labour candidate Susie Stride is going to do battle with journalist Angela Epstein. I do think that with everything going on the streets at the moment, this is an incredibly tone-deaf thing for Labour to do. Stay tuned.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Sarah, welcome to the show. Obviously, you work for a tobacco company, so a little caveat there to slip in. Nevertheless, it's no surprise that the illegal market is growing so much. When you look at the cost of cigarettes in Britain, huge amounts of duty, and oftentimes, of course, criminality always finds its way into the system. Tell us more about your report.
Absolutely. I mean, up to 90% of a packet of cigarettes is tax. And in the last year, there's been 2 tax increases that have equated more to the last 3 years combined. So now, if you're a roll-your-own smoker, a 30-gram pouch of roll-your-own will cost £22.50, but you can buy a counterfeit pack of 50 grams for £3. So there's a massive disparity. A lot of illegal tobacco is imported, but we do also have a problem in the UK with illegal tobacco factories. So in the last month, there's been an illegal tobacco factory in Gateshead, in Bury, busted, producing roll-your-own tobacco. And on the 12th of July this month, West Midlands gang illegal tobacco factory, the gang was found guilty of producing illegal tobacco, and that was more than £5 million lost tax revenue to the government. And actually, all of those people found guilty got a suspended sentence.
And how does that work? They're literally importing container loads of raw tobacco and packaging it up in factories in Britain? And they're using what appears to be British packaging illegally?
Yeah, some of it is branded packaging, so some of it isn't the kind of unbranded packaging we'd see on cigarettes and roll your own now, but it's relatively simple to reproduce, especially RYO. Our own pack swap data now shows that about 50% of the roll your own market is illegal tobacco.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Look, coming up, Reform UK's Lee Anderson has his say on the violent disorder that's sweeping the nation. But first, should UK nationals be prioritised for social housing? It's time now for tonight's head-to-head. Now, I can't help but feel that this ties in directly in some way with what we are seeing going on in Britain at the moment. I mean, it's been revealed that Keir Starmer's government will scrap the Tories' plans to prioritise British homes for British workers. The reforms would have required social housing applicants to demonstrate a connection to the UK for at least 10 years and their local area for at least 2 years. They would also have disqualified certain criminals, including those convicted of terror offences, who would have been banned from social housing for life. However, ministers quietly confirmed late last week that they've axed the crackdown in a written parliamentary answer they probably hoped would fly under the radar. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook said the government does not intend to enact the policy proposal set out in the consultation in question. A formal response will be issued in due course. Well, this comes as the government plans as well to scatter asylum seekers right across the country, utilising sites from former care homes, university halls, other lower-cost rental housing, etc., instead of sites like Scampton and the Bibby Stockholm. So tonight I'm asking, as the government scraps the Tories' British Homes for British Workers plan, actually, should UK nationals not be prioritised for social housing? Let me know your thoughts. Go to gbnews.com/your say. Tweet us at GB News. Make sure you go and vote in our poll. Going head-to-head on this, our former Labour candidate Susie Stride and journalist and broadcaster Angela Epstein. Both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Angela, I will start with you, if that's OK. I think this is, frankly, quite tone-deaf at the moment from Labour. The idea that you could have Brits, well, the perception might be, put to the back of the queue.
OK, well, I think the first thing I would say is I'd like to put an ocean of clear blue water between this conversation and the repellent racist narrative that is triggering or giving horsepower to all the vile opportunists, the thugs and all the useful idiots that are tearing across our country at the moment. This is about a pragmatic discussion about a limited supply of social housing and those who need it. Now, it's quite clear that we don't have enough. I mean, that's not a new new kind of thing. And the concept of some of these tests being abandoned, I mean, you mentioned, I mean, British homes for British workers is an ugly phrase. It has a lot of racist undertones. But let's just strip that away. Let's also acknowledge the useful contribution immigrants have made, lawful immigrants have made to this country, including my own grandfather. So this is not about the whole keep out Johnny Foreigner hideous narrative. It's about saying we have a limited pool of social housing. And the tests that the Tories wish to deploy were in order to help decide how and where they could best be used. This is not about trying to push people onto the streets and being homeless. So the fact that they're stripping, for example, the conditions you mentioned, such as those who have been involved with terrorism issues or antisocial behaviour, I mean, do people really have to live next door to those people ahead of someone who is more deserving of that case?
Yeah, Susie, I'll bring you in now. Look, the latest polling, we're going to be talking about this a bit later on, but the latest polling as of today from YouGov shows that the public's two of the three major concerns to the public at the moment in this country, top being immigration, third being crime. And if we have now a situation where social housing can be made more readily available to conceivably people who've just arrived in this country and criminals, I suspect that might be a problem for Labour, Susie.
Yeah, I mean, look, if what is being said here by this headline was true, I would be extremely angry, up in arms, and this is a disgrace. You know, I come from an area of some of the, highest levels of social housing. You know, my mum was brought up in a council house. In fact, when I was in her belly, they had a violent alcoholic. They had to put up with antisocial behaviour. You know, I know firsthand what this does to people's lives. But actually, this headline is sadly really misleading. Before I came on the call tonight, I thought, let me actually call up someone I know who works for a massive housing landlord and just ask them. They've got no political allegiance, but I thought, this is someone who, is not going to be biased. And they said, Susie, I don't know what this headline's talking about. We've had these powers for years. We already can do this. We already will not allow, clearly, terrorists to get social housing. People that have antisocial behaviour, straight again, they will not get social housing. Obviously, it's different. If you're already in social housing and you're committing antisocial behaviour, that's a different debate and something that 100% we need to come down hard on. But literally, this headline, unfortunately, just seems it's almost out of date. What my understanding is the vast majority of local authorities across this country are already doing this. So I'm not quite sure what the debate is here. Now, if it was true that actually they didn't have these powers, then I myself would be extremely angry about this and saying, what's going on here? But the vast majority
Labour, this is literally something that was said in Parliament, or said in Parliament a while ago as a written answer to a question. I mean, it is a thing that Labour are rowing back on what was the Conservative policy. Andrew, I don't know, you looked a bit puzzled there.
Well, yes, because the thing is that, even within the few short weeks of Starmer's administration, and, headline exclusive, I'm not a fan of Keir Starmer, but really, like you say, the rowing back, the U-turns, what did people expect? The Labour Party is here to support those who are in need, and that's the kind of the mantra that underpins the whole Labour concept of, you fight for the underdog, you fight for people that need all the decent things in life that we know about. But the fact is that we do need to have a very sensible, considered conversation about controlled immigration in this country, not because we're racist, not because we're intolerant or because we don't like other cultures, but because this is an issue of supply and demand. And I think because of that conversation that needs to be had in a considered and circumspect way, the fact that Labour are now doing a U-turn suggests that they are sticking their fingers in their ears and they're not prepared to talk about it. Starmer, he knuckled the Rwanda plan. OK, it had an awful lot of flaws, agreed. He's not given us a credible alternative. People are risking their lives crossing the channel. Local communities are suffering. And therefore, there needs to be a sensible conversation. And this kind of headline is not helpful. This kind of U-turn is not helpful.
OK, the criminality aspect to it, Susie, is one thing. And yes, I would hope that regardless of whatever it might say in the statute book, if someone is a convicted terrorist, then the Social Housing Authority would have at least the capacity to say, no, we don't fancy that individual here. But the other aspect to this story is, of course, this idea that it's going to be easier for people who've just come to Britain or just received asylum to then get houses. There's the Operation Scatter policy as well. As we've been talking about, unfortunately, we have a finite amount of housing stock in this country. And with the country the way it is at the moment, again, sadly, but there is a tinderbox going on, I do worry, Susie, that it will play into people's hands if all of a sudden they see more social housing or housing in the private rental sector at the lower end of it that does go to people who have only just come here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that's going to be a reality on the ground. I just think it's really important to know that people are not going to land in this country and suddenly get on, you know, the housing waiting list of local authorities. That's just not going to happen. However, I absolutely agree with what Angela is saying. You know, you can't have uncontrolled immigration. You know, that is something that we do need to tackle. Like I keep saying this, we cannot ignore all of those people at the election that happened a month ago and the way they voted and why they voted that way. You know, all the parties have got to eat humble pie and listen to those people, and they can't be, you know, snobbish about it or sneering about it. They've got to humble themselves and they've got to listen. And I absolutely agree on that. One of the things I would say on housing is, you know, it's really, really important that we talk about the bigger picture here. That one of the major things we've got to do is build housing. You know, and we are going to build housing, and this is a massive thing. And I just want to say, and important for your listeners to know, and I think it's really important to have hope in this area of housing, because, you know, I mean, I'm not that young now, but I really struggled to get on the housing waiting list, and it's so depressing. You know, you're working hard, your husband's working hard, and it's impossible. But we are going to build homes. We're going to build 1.5 million homes. I don't think that's just a stat. I think we're going to do it. And I think that is exciting, and I think that is hopeful.
Well, both of you, thank you very, very much. Good stuff. That was former Labour candidate Susie Stride there, and journalist and broadcaster Angela Epstein. Now, a Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government spokesperson told us today, following the events in 2011, powers are in place to make sure those convicted of an offence at the scene of a riot can be evicted from social housing. If a person's immigration leave does not allow them recourse to public funds, they will not be eligible to receive social housing. There is no guarantee of social housing, even when a person is eligible. Look, who do you agree with? Should UK nationals be prioritised for social housing? Ragnar on X says that's a no-brainer. The priority of any government should be the protection of its people. Look, your verdict is now in. 95% of you think that the UK nationals should be prioritised for social housing. 5% of you disagree. Coming up, Robert Jenrick, the Tory leadership, well, favourite, according to many, has been branded Islamophobic for this.
You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 or 9
Akbar
days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested or...
But is he right to claim that it can sometimes be used in an intimidating way? Criminal defence lawyer, former parliamentary candidate as well, Mohammed Akunji, has his say on that, and his former client, Shamima Begum, well, the latest there on how she could apparently still find her way back to Britain. But next, as a poll reveals 47% of people believe Nigel Farage holds some level of responsibility for the UK riots. Is the Reform leader being unfairly targeted? Lee Anderson is live and he's next.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade. And then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies. Temperatures, certainly rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers. But for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight. Loads coming your way. Was the Tory leadership hopeful, Robert Jenrick, wrong to suggest that the police should arrest protesters and people shouting Allahu Akbar on the street? But first, former UK leader Nigel Farage was taken to task yesterday over allegations by some that he may have encouraged the riots, with his comments about some Southport stabbings, of course.
One of the reasons the Southport riots were as bad as they were is we weren't told the truth. There were stories online from some very prominent folks with big followings, Andrew Tate, etc., suggesting the man had crossed the English Channel in a boat in October 2023. Other suggestions that he was an active Muslim. And much of this led to the riots that we saw.
But you amplified that because you said some reports suggest.
I asked a very simple question.
So I'm joined now by Reform UK MP Lee Anderson. Lee, does Nigel bear any responsibility for the kind of tinderbox that we've got at the moment?
No, he doesn't, Patrick. The people that to blame for this is Parliament. And Nigel touches on this every single day. He talks about the effects of mass legal migration. He talks about the effects of mass illegal migration, and people in this country are fed up and down the country. And we've seen the madness again this week. I think Angela Rayner is stating that, you know, the illegal migrants that's coming over the Channel, she's going to disperse these all over the country. And you know what? The problems we're having at the moment, which is shocking, Patrick, it's going to continue to happen unless we get to the nub of the problem and start having serious conversations with people in places like Ashfield and some of the places around the country that are suffering these awful riots. Let's talk to these people and see what the problem is and try and put that problem right.
Do you think he was right to come out and essentially say that he was a bit misled by Andrew Tate? Do you think that was a good look?
I don't know. We'd have to speak to Nigel about that. I think, you know, Nigel, we have to remember that Nigel's not only a politician, and a good politician at that, he's also a broadcaster. So he's coming at two angles sometimes. He can ask difficult questions, you know, and make these statements, and a lot of it is thought-provoking, I will admit that from Nigel, but that's his job, and he's very good at it. And he doesn't shy away from the difficult issues. We've seen Starmer last week make this ridiculous speech on the steps of Downing Street. What did he do? You might as well have just chucked a bucket of petrol over a fire, because it's just exploded, hasn't it, over the past 7 days or so.
So you think Keir Starmer is more to blame for what we're seeing on the streets, the riots and the protests, than Nigel Farage?
I absolutely do, yeah. He denies that there's two-tier policing. We know there is. There's two-tier government, two-tier policing. It's been shocking, Patrick, what's happened this week. You know, we are sort of turning a blind eye to certain demographics in this country and focusing all our attentions, all our policing resources onto another group of people. Yes, these people who are committing horrible crimes and damaging stuff and setting fire to cars and vehicles and buses and hotels, they need locking up, but it's got to be fair policing. And at the moment, it doesn't look fair to me.
OK, well, it's interesting you should mention this, because actually I thought there was an astonishing intervention today by a chap called John Hayes, who was injured. I mean, this guy's a hero, OK? He's an absolute hero. He was injured trying to stop, excuse me, the Southport suspect last week. Now, he was actually stabbed in the leg during this incident. Now, he slammed Keir Starmer's response to the riots today. Let's have a little listen to what he said.
I actually don't think that the trouble and the riots has got anything at all to do with the Southport stabbings. There appears to be a strong undercurrent of discontent for some time about the levels of immigration, and this is just a catalyst or a trigger, but I don't think it's the root cause. And I'm not particularly politically motivated, but I do get dismayed when I hear Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper talking about, the police are going to come down with the full force of the law, etc., on these people. But they're not actually talking about the root cause.
I thought that was really an astonishing intervention. Lee, what do you make of that?
Well, Mr Hayes is quite right. You know, if Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer had got anything about them, they'd go and see this man, have a long conversation with him, because I think he's bang on the money here. And this man, what, in his 60s, he's lived a life, he's been involved in an horrific incident. He must be thinking now, he's lucky to be alive. He's had, quite a long time now to think hard about this, what's happened to him and happened to those little girls. Now, go and speak to him. Go and speak to a real person that's been on the front line and have a listen to what he's got to say, Patrick.
There's a few aspects of this that are interesting, because that chap there sounded pretty mild-mannered.
Yeah.
He sounded like, I think, a relatively normal guy. He said he wasn't political at all. I'm inclined to believe him, really, from what he said there. And, if he'd said that out on the streets at the moment, without the context of having been an alleged victim when it all came to this type of thing, I wonder if there's a chance at the moment that he might have been called far-right.
He probably would. Again, this is at Starmer's door. He just keeps saying over the past week, it's far-right thugs. Yes, there are some far-right thugs out there on the streets. We know that, Patrick. But a lot of people are just disaffected people, especially the young men in this country. They've had enough. They don't see a decent future for themselves and their friends. Yeah, go on.
Well, it's just on this. I think it is important to try to... I know this is a very difficult situation, but, what would reform do now if you were in power to stop what we're seeing? Again, I'll say we're going to go back to Aldershot in a few minutes with Charlie Peaches is out there. There's issues going on in Birmingham, parts of London, other areas in the UK right now. What would you do to try to stop this?
Well, a sensible conversation, Patrick, on mass immigration. It's affecting the whole of society at the moment. But first and foremost, politicians, instead of just locking people up, and they should be locked up if they're committing these horrible crimes, go and speak to these people. Sit down with these people. Talk to the community leaders. These people are not being listened to. Parliament doesn't represent this country at the moment. We know that for a fact. And if we don't listen to these people and try and find solutions to their problems, and by the way, it is mass immigration, then it's just going to continue forever. We can fill our prisons up. We can build as many prisons and prison cells as we want. This problem will continue to happen.
Keir Starmer will probably be quite happy tonight. So far. And I'm not, I don't want to preempt anything, because anything can be a flashpoint in a minute. But, the police have been out in force. There's been these, quotes unquote, anti-fascist, anti-racist protests. As far as I can tell, at least a couple of them have just turned really into pro-Palestine protests, but whatever. And there's been no kind of full-scale race riots on the streets. And he might think that he's done a very good job, because he's seen people sentenced, given long sentences today. He might be saying, I've got control of this, I've done it.
Yeah, but it's dividing the country, Patrick. It's all right appeasing one section of society, which he has done at the moment, but he's actually divided the country, and this undercurrent is going to be there, for a long, long time. And I fear for the future of this country. There are bitter people in this country seeing these men locked up today, and rightly so, but then they see the other two men from a few weeks back in Manchester who actually, beat these women, police women, to, horrific scenes there. They're walking the streets. They've not even been charged yet.
They've not been charged yet. It's something, obviously, the police will say that they're still investigating. Lee, thank you very much. Lee Anderson there.
Thank you.
Reform UK MP. Right, coming up, huge police presence tonight on the streets of Britain as the country braces for more rioting, but Southport hero John Hayes, as you just heard a little bit earlier on, did have a thing or two to say to Keir Starmer. So is it time that Starmer needs to address the issues at the heart of this unrest? I'm going to tackle that at 10, but next... Was Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick wrong to suggest that police should immediately arrest protesters shouting Allahu Akbar? He's been branded an Islamophobe. I'll show you his defiant response to that next. I'm also joined by Shamima Begum's former lawyer, Mohammed Akunji. Could she still find a way back into Britain? Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We got an incredible story this week of a young teenager who has raised more than £5,000 for charity.
13-year-old, just 13 years old, Cameron Hutchison cycled the West Highland Way with his dad, Colin, in just 25 hours, raising money for international food charity Mary's Meals. And the 96-mile route took Cameron and Colin to the foot of Ben Nevis.
Wow. Now, the organisation provides daily school meals to more than 2.4 million children in countries such as Syria, Haiti and Malawi.
We are delighted to be joined now by cyclist and fundraiser Cameron Hutchison. Cameron, it's so lovely to have you here. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Well, we're very impressed to have you. We are honoured to have you. First of all, do you like cycling?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite sports, so yeah, I just wanted to do that.
What kind of bike did you do that enormous distance in? Did you have a special bike? Was it adapted?
Well, it was my cross-country bike that I just normally use for cross-country races. So, yeah.
Wow.
You can actually see it on the screen there with the blue handlebars. That's the bike I was using.
We can, and quite a route you went on as well. So, Cameron, you're 13 years old. When did you start cycling?
I've sort of been cycling my whole life. So I got a little red balance bike when I was maybe 3 or 2, maybe. And then I kind of just got bigger bikes as I went on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. So, Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has been criticised for these comments that he made this morning.
Well, I have been very critical of the police in the past, particularly around the attitude of some police forces to the protests that we saw since October the 7th. You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 or 9
Akbar
days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested or...
And Jenrick hit back, saying, whilst Allahu Akbar is spoken peacefully and spiritually by millions of British Muslims in their daily lives, aggressive chanting of it can be intimidatory and threatening. And then he put this video out. All right, well, I'm joined now by criminal defence lawyer, a former legal representative as well of Shamima Begum. It's Mohammed Akunji. Look, thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you back on the show. OK, so was that Islamophobic in your view, or do you think he's got a point?
Well, I think the literal translation of Allahu Akbar is God is great. That's simply not offensive. But if someone like Mr. Jenrick would like to go out and find offence wherever he chooses to find it, well, that's very much a subjective element on his part.
Would you have not been a bit... Do you not think maybe it was... Sorry to cut, but I think on that, because he's then provided context, hasn't he, right? So I agree with you that obviously just saying it is not offensive at all or anything. But, you know, what we just showed there was in Bolton, I believe. I mean, do you think that was a bit intimidatory?
Well, I mean, somebody could say, well, you know, abracadabra. in a very intimidating way. And then the point is that it's the manner in which it's said. But what he has said is that those specific words are the thing that ought to trigger an arrest. And simply, that's just not how the criminal law works. The behavior of somebody, if they're intimidating, whatever they're saying, they may be speaking in a foreign language or one that's entirely made up of tongues, depending on which church you go to. But that could be intimidating. But it's the behavior itself that triggers an arrest, not the words per se.
So as far as you're concerned, when we see, I mean, there's clips as well that we've played a couple of nights ago of things like in Birmingham, for example, where there were similar shouts from similar groups of men, balaclavas, etc., a couple of them with weapons. When they chant that in that situation or say that in that situation, do you not think that they might be trying to be a bit intimidatory?
Well, it depends on whether the right wing has set fire to a police station in the background. I think it's a little bit funny that we're talking about words that simply praise God in the context of riots where we've had police stations burned down and families intimidated in immigration centres. I think that there needs to be a bit of a rebalancing of what is a priority and what isn't.
Did we have a police station burnt down? I mean, I can remember seeing quite a few issues outside a police station in Rochdale, but I'm not sure. That wasn't the far right. I believe there was a police station burnt down. Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing I remember seeing Allah Akbar shouted outside a police station in Rochdale, actually, quite recently as well. I mean, is it right to say that we're only bothered about it when it's just a kind of riot involved, do you think?
Well, it's been brought up in the context of now, which is literally today we have immigration lawyers who are being targeted. So if Mr. Jenrick was bringing it up on another day, then that would be the context of that. But the context of now is where we've got the far right trying to burn down, this country or institutions within this country and people who are just doing their jobs in this country in accordance with the law to intimidate them. So it's completely out of whack.
OK. All right. Look, I do want to whiz us on to talk about Shamima Begum, because the legal fight to restore her UK citizenship has received a bit of a blow today. The Supreme Court refused to hear her appeal. People were saying, right, that's it now. There's nothing left for her. So she's definitely not coming back to Britain. I believe that there is possibly still a way back for her. Is that right? The ECHR?
Yes. So her lawyers, which are Burbo Pierce, they've decided that they are going to appeal to the ECHR at Strasbourg and lay their case there. It was fairly clear-cut from a previous Supreme Court judgment that the current thinking is that the decision of a Home Secretary is higher ranking than the right to a fair trial per se. And so this decision today was not unexpected. But the result of that, going to Strasbourg, was a necessary outcome of what's happened.
Do you think that the ECHR will probably decide that she should be allowed back to Britain?
I'd imagine they would. I mean, the European countries have taken a very different tack to this particular issue than we have. And we've even Donald Trump, when he was president of the United States, was raising his eyebrows at the UK's positioning with respect to this. So we've struck out in a very different way to other countries. And I think the Strasbourg will apply the thinking that Europe has applied to the situation rather than a barren one.
I suspect you're probably right about that. And I think that will provide Keir Starmer with possibly another problem for him quite early on in his tenure, really, isn't it? And if he has to respect their verdict on there, he may well just want to. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you back on the show. A couple of quite tough topics there, but thank you for having a chat with us about them. That's Mohammed Kunji there. Coming up, a shock poll has revealed that 1 in 3 Brits support protests against immigration. Does Keir Starmer need to get real and actually address the proper issues? I'm going to be tackling that next. I'm also going to be taking you back to Aldershot, where our reporter Charlie Peters has been on the ground, and we're getting reports that things might have heated up ever so slightly. Stay tuned.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade, and then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies, temperatures, certainly rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers, but for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway. An incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. Tinderbox Britain is currently simmering away. Our reporter Charlie Peters is in Aldershot for us, where police feared that there'd be trouble, and it did heat up somewhat.
Do you recognise, though, that people do have concerns about immigration and those people aren't far right?
Well, Labour stands accused of still ignoring people's concerns. Wait till you see her response to that. And
it's complete nonsense, because we stand in the middle
we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
The Met's top cop won't admit to two-tier policing. Meanwhile...
Salam alaikum. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, is that really a police force in Britain? And...
You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 or 9
Akbar
days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested or...
Tory leadership favourite Robert Jenrick is accused of Islamophobia, but he hit back with this clip. I've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages with the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Oh, and yes, what happens next here, please? Get ready, Britain, here we go. Labour can't just ignore immigration and hope this all dies down forever. Next.
Good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Your headlines. Thousands of counter-protesters have taken to the streets across England as police brace for further unrest. Hundreds of counter-protesters have gathered in London, Liverpool and Rotherham, whilst they've also been reported in Sheffield, Bristol, Birmingham and Aldershot. Thousands of specialist officers are braced to respond and prosecutors are considering whether to apply terrorism charges. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has thanked all police officers for their work tonight to protect and support local communities. It comes as at least 12 individuals have been convicted for their part in the ongoing disorder. Speaking earlier, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, said there's no excuse for thuggery.
I know that the public will be feeling anxious about the reports of potential more unrest tonight, but the police will be there to respond to any violent and criminality that we see on our streets. There's no place for that on our UK streets, and the police will do their job like they have done exceptionally well under very difficult circumstances like I've seen here and witnessed today what they faced, missiles being thrown at them and attacks, but the police will be there to keep the public safe and there's no excuse for thuggery and criminality on the streets.
It comes as the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, dismissed accusations of two-tier policing, calling it complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued that last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if ethnic minorities were involved. Meanwhile, it's understood the King has asked for daily updates on protests planned around the UK. Following the Southport stabbings, King Charles is said to be engaging privately in the issues that the unrest has generated. The King has a record of involvement in issues around community cohesion and interfaith dialogue. And some breaking news to bring to you now. All 3 Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna have been cancelled after a planned terrorist attack was confirmed. The shows have to be cancelled due to taking place on Thursday, Friday and Saturday at the Ernst Happel Stadium. 2 people were arrested today on suspicion of planning Islamist attacks on large events in the area around the Austrian capital. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I want to take you straight into the action now, actually, because we have been told all about a night of rioting right across the UK. We've seen several flashpoints, Birmingham, Brighton. Aldershot is one of them as well, and that's where we're going to go now, because our reporter Charlie Peters is on the scene where there were fears of violent clashes. And Charlie, I understand that you've been there for quite some time now. Can you tell us what's been going on, please, what the mood is like and some of the people you've been talking to?
Sure, well, Patrick, the mood here was tense. Before any protests started here, lots of shops were boarding up in Aldershot in the town centre. There were rumours, weren't there, of demonstrations across the country, and there was meant to be one on the High Street in Aldershot. That never materialised. There was a peaceful protest about 10 minutes away in Farnborough. About 150 people attended that. We were there. Anti-mass migration. They said they were anti-small boats. They condemned the violence and the riots we've seen across the country in the last week, but at the same time said they were very angry about those in government and the media describing them and others as far right. They said it was a blanket term. This was very unfair. But then later on, Stand Up to Racism did have a protest in the town centre, which we came back to observe. Many of the people, British Transport Police, a sergeant just here told us, had come from out of town for that demonstration. And then more locals on the other side of the road, more kind of anti-mass migration protesters also stood up, divided by a police line as they hurled insults and chants at one another. Now, there was a moment of confusion, some people running around. The police told me that a woman was removed from the scene, unrelated to either demonstration, but that caused a small moment of havoc. And the Stand Up to Racism protest was then moved behind me to Aldershot train station, where they were asked to leave the town, as many of them had planned to do so. Of course, as I said, many of them coming from outside of Aldershot. But earlier today, as they moved away, I spoke to one of those Stand Up to Racism protesters about why he was here.
Against the fascists who are trying to create division and hatred in our country, which is absolutely disgraceful. I was born in this town, and that's why I came down here, to be with my community in Aldershot. I'm not shipped in. Yeah, I live in London now, but I was born here, and I'm proud of refugees coming here, and we need to support them.
Well, that protest is now over. Both sides have left this location. Police just leaving while you were on that clip, clearing up the town after a day of tension, but thankfully no extreme or serious violence here in Aldershot.
Yeah, Charlie, thank you very, very much, and well done for everything today. Look, fascinating stuff to unpack there, isn't there? People from out of town, the anti-racism people, turning up for a fascist protest that never materialised. We're seeing quite a lot of that going on this evening, I must say. And I do wonder when the dust settles whether or not people will have a few questions to answer about what was the intelligence behind this idea that we were going to see 100 far-right protests right across Britain. But nonetheless, Britain was braced for a night of riots. I must say there are still some flashpoints taking place in other areas, but people might have been put off by scenes like this, which is what you see now, heavy police protections boarded up, or prison sentences dished out earlier today. Like this, one man was sentenced to 3 years for punching a police officer at a protest, for example. But I don't think this problem has gone away. Today, a hero who tried to stop the alleged Southport stabber, Jonathan Hayes, who was stabbed in the leg himself, gave this very stark warning to Sir Keir Starmer.
I actually don't think that the trouble and the riots has got anything at all to do with the Southport stabbings. There appears to be a strong undercurrent of discontent for some time about the levels of immigration, and this is just a catalyst or a trigger, but I don't think it's the root cause. And I'm not particularly politically motivated, but I do get dismayed when I hear Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper talking about, the police are going to come down with the full force of the law, etc., on these people. But they're not actually talking about the root cause.
OK, so he's there saying that the root cause needs to be addressed. Well, here's Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, continuing to ignore the massive elephant in the room.
Do you recognise, though, that people do have concerns about immigration and those people aren't far right?
Well, look, coming on the streets, throwing missiles at the police, attacking hotels like this one I'm here today is not a legitimate grievance. It's not the way we do politics in this country, and nobody should be condoning that. This is thuggery, this is violence. Someone could have got seriously injured over the last couple of days, and it's no excuse for that, and people should stay away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, fine, but they're desperate not to mention immigration, aren't they? A new polling from YouGov reveals that people now think immigration is the top issue facing the country. Crime is in third as well now. And a poll also shows that 1 in 3 people have supported this week's anti-immigration protests. This comes off the back of Labour's Operation Scatter to house asylum seekers around the country in social housing, old care homes, etc., as well as news that they're going to allow, potentially, violent criminals, terrorists, to stay on the social housing waiting list, although they say that there are barriers in place to stop that from happening. It begs the question, is this problem actually going to go away unless Labour deals with the root cause of people's anger? Now, I'm about to show you, in a couple of moments' time anyway, some more footage from tonight's incident. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. We've got landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and we've also got author and journalist Rebecca Reid. So, look, I'm going to play a couple of clips for you now. This is from Croydon. So the Met Police have just put this clip out. So if we take this footage now, 8 people have just been arrested following disorder in Croydon, and that was this evening. The Metropolitan Police said the disruption is not linked to protests and it appears to be pure antisocial behaviour. The Met Police said approximately 50 people have gathered in North End Road in Croydon. They've made clear their intention is to cause disruption and fuel disorder. They've dragged and thrown objects down the road, thrown bottles at officers. This is not linked to protests. This appears to be pure antisocial behaviour. Officers are moving in numbers to make the arrest. This is also the scene a little bit earlier on in Brighton, where there have been some more flashpoints today. So we can show you some of that now. So this was one of the largest, quotes-unquote, anti-fascist / refugees welcome / pro-Palestine gatherings that you will see. There was a brief moment where a couple of people turned up and there was shouts of Nazi scum, etc. I'm just going to show you a clip of Walthamstow as well. This is in London. So the reports were saying that around 10,000 people turned up in Walthamstow today. Can I just say there appears to be a common denominator at all of these things, which is that there does not appear to be any far-right presence. There doesn't. I mean, we're not hearing any. No one seems to be reporting that there really has been any, and there isn't. I think there's Brentford as well we can show you, as well. It's Brentford as well there. And I do just wonder with this, Mark, whether or not, what are we really looking at here? Where was this intelligence that we were going to have 100 far-right Islamophobic protests popping up by an organised army of nutters over the course of the UK?
Well, a very fair question, Patrick. Look, I mean, I think an approach of caution, given events of recent days and weeks, was probably the right one. But we seem to have a lot of counter-demonstrators here and not many demonstrators from the counter.
Shouting at air, aren't they?
Yeah, more or less. And, I think it's unhelpful. We heard, no doubt sincerely meant from just earlier on your show from that chap who'd gone back to Aldershot. I think we've got to tone down the language really across the board here. Look, there are a number of right-wing extremists in the United Kingdom who will try and cause trouble. But you can't box them together with anyone and everyone who is concerned about immigration policy. And in terms of polling the public, Patrick, I was looking through the YouGov poll, who's to basically blame or who bears responsibility for all of this unrest. Of course, virtually everybody agrees it's those who are actually causing the unrest themselves. Yeah. But intriguingly, 62% of Labour voters, 56% of Lib Dem voters, 78% of Tory voters, and 95% of Reform voters say immigration policy in recent years bears some of the responsibility of where we're at. Now, you can't expect Keir Starmer to untangle that immediately, but my concern is that he's not even drawing any attention to it at all. OK,
Adam, I'll fire this one over to you now. If Labour aren't willing to address the immigration issue or the illegal immigration issue, we might not have seen, massive riots and flare-ups, and I hope we don't have any going on into the evening and all of this stuff. I don't think this problem's going away, though, is it? They might feel as though they, quote-unquote, got away with it tonight, but I'm worried that it's not gone anywhere.
Look, as younger people fail to get council houses or our health systems collapse or our housing system collapses, benefit system collapses, with the sheer number... 50,000, they're saying, could come in this year, illegal immigrants. Now, that used to be the legal amount of people that used to come into this country. Now, again, we don't know who they are. We don't know their intentions. And we've spoke about this a lot. And it doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, or if you're brown. Illegal immigration will affect your life at some point or your community. So it has to be addressed. And this labelling as everyone as, oh, if you talk about illegal immigration, you're racist, you're far right. Okay. No, I very rarely speak to someone that is for illegal immigration. I don't know anyone. So it has to be addressed, and this will be a flashpoint going forward.
All right, so Rebecca, we had a clip earlier on of Angela Rayner being asked directly, really, whether or not she thought that immigration was a big issue on this. She skirted around the issue. OK, Keir Starmer obviously has not addressed it so far. Then you have these YouGov polls that came out today, which shows that now 51% of the British public think that immigration is the biggest issue facing the country. Do you think Labour is at risk here of not actually identifying the root cause of some of the issues?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that it's a complete myth that anybody thinks that being concerned about immigration is synonymous with being far right. I haven't seen anybody credibly suggest that at all. Lots of very centrist people are concerned about immigration. I'm concerned about immigration because there are people who are drowning because they're on illegal boats. So it's perfectly normal to be concerned about it. But at the moment, when tensions are so high, anything Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer says is very dicey because you don't want to add more fuel to this fire. So of course they need to be working on it, and of course things like the biometric, fingerprinting, having the border force be rolled out, and being able to keep better tabs on people, and clearing the backlog and processing faster and not wasting money on hotels. All of those things need to happen. They need to do what they said they were going to do. But I think people also need to stop this victim mentality of, I'm being called far right, I'm being called far right. No one is calling you far right if you weren't throwing bricks, if you weren't trying to hurt people. You're not a protester. You're not far right if you're concerned about it.
So you think they have been?
I get labelled far right. I get labelled racist. I've never been racist in my life. I'm just against 50,000 people coming across that don't have a right to do that. And a lot of the time are economic migrants, and some of our poorest people in this country are people of colour, and they are missing out on council houses. They are missing out on healthcare appointments because of this, and it has to be addressed. One thing I will say about these counter demonstrations, where have suddenly thousands of placards come from? Fresh new placards. Who's paying for that? Who's organised that?
Who do you think paid for it? Who do you think organised it?
I've just asked the question.
But do you have a theory?
No, I'm saying who has organised that? I'm asking the question. Where does...
Do you have... But I'm just asking, do you have...
They look a bit like Socialist Workers' Party-style banners, but I can only say they look a bit like that. I don't know.
It sounds a bit like... I might could be completely wrong, but from the way that you phrased that, it sounded to me like you think that they somehow knew this was coming and had already prepared their banners.
To me, it sounds like there is an organised group that could jump on the problems that are out there at the moment and use it to their advantage.
So that is called a conspiracy theory,
no.
And it's not a very helpful thing to perpetuate on television. We did not know. There is no suggestion that people knew this was coming and they prepped placards.
No, that's an outright lie, because we all knew it was coming, which is why tens of thousands of people have turned up. Since Sunday, I have had a list on my phone of the Telegram messages with these exact locations of where these things were going to take place. If no one knew this was coming, how do you think 10,000 people turned up in Walthamstow? Was it a coincidence?
Well, as in today they knew it was coming. This isn't part of some grand scheme.
Rebecca, people knew this was coming days.
For certainly.
But sorry, when are you suggesting that this has been kind of constructed over a long period of time to create unrest, or are you saying that people reacted to the riots?
It was taking place days ago. I mean, everyone knew it.
Yeah, but there's a difference between people organically getting together because they want to do a counter-protest and there being some overarching conspiracy to kind of gather people to create tension.
It's just organisation, isn't it? It's not a conspiracy.
But there is a difference between organic... There's a difference between organic grassroots protesting and somebody...
tell people where to gather. I mean, if somebody organises that...
I'm not really sure. I think people might have got the wrong end of the stick as things are being said, though. Mark, I was just asking, do you think that Labour have got any chance of really getting a grip of this? Will this be something that just goes away? Because we've lived through flashpoints in the past and they have evaporated, but if they're not going to willingly talk about some of the big problems in this country at the moment, is it going to go anywhere?
No, because I think that the problem you've got, and I'm obviously not wishing for this at all, is you can imagine some other ghastly incident, possibly not even directly associated with immigration, that will be another flashpoint. I mean, it seems from what we know about what happened in Southport that really it's not connected to immigration, but people are so on edge that any anything that goes wrong or awry, and if we get some other ghastly incident in some town or city...
But it doesn't seem to happen the other way around, because for instance, when women are murdered by their husbands, or there was a little black boy who was stabbed to death by a white man about 6 weeks ago, and that didn't create this. So it's not like anything can do it. It's specifically...
George Floyd's death, many thousands of miles away, created a trigger for an awful lot of demonstrations and criminal behaviour in the United Kingdom. So that would be an example the other way around. That's what led to the Black
In the
Lives
last
Matters
4
process.
years, nothing domestically has caused the inverse.
When was that?
Well, it has actually. I mean, we saw what happened at Manchester Airport literally a couple of weeks ago. But
so it is a tinderbox, and something could kick it out, and I think will. And really, the underlying problem here, it doesn't exactly matter whether Angela Rayner says it in a television interview today, is do you think the present levels of immigration, both legal and illegal, are broadly sustainable and broadly in the right ballpark? Or do you not? And if you don't, what changes in policy should you have? And we need to have a pretty, serious, genuine debate about that.
But I think everyone agrees
people
that.
can take different views on both sides, but that debate is just not happening.
We're going to have to put a pin in this for now. We'll probably return to it when we do the front pages in a little bit. But I do want to just whiz us on because yes, we are going to be getting all of the latest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages shortly, and I'm going to reveal what is going on here as well. But next, yes, thousands of police officers, they're on standby. In fact, they're out on the streets at the moment as well. And there have been heavy-handed prison sentences dished out today as well. Do we think some rioters have been scared off? What's really going on? I'm going to get unrivalled analysis now from former police armed response sergeant. So stay tuned for all of that.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand, just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on this
hi.
show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think, pretty fairly priced products. And even more so, go and see the gardens. You know, as we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. We're about to show you in a couple of moments, actually, some fresh clips to, I think, put a slightly different light on some of the protests we've seen tonight. But police were braced for more than 100 protests across the country tonight. We were told far-right groups were set to target immigration services, and barring 8 arrests in Croydon after protesters threw bottles at police. They were counter-protesters or whatever they were, by the way. The evening has thankfully passed without significant trouble so far. Look, perhaps the potential rioters were put off by hefty sentences handed out to the like of Southport troublemaker Derek Drummond, who was given 3 years after admitting violent disorder and assaulting an emergency worker earlier today. Look, was this a well-timed victory for our beleaguered police forces? I'm joined now by former police armed response sergeant Harry Tanguy. Harry, thank you very, very much. Look, I'm going to play just a couple of clips for you, Harry, actually, of something that's just coming through to us now. So this was in Brighton earlier today. So that is the people on their way to this so-called counter-protest. I think a couple of the flags there are quite interesting. They appear to be, you know, quite... I think they're some of the quite hard left-wing flags, aren't they? Yeah. It's communist flags, apparently, and I'm hearing there. So that was some of the stuff from Brighton earlier. Bear in mind that we heard from our reporter in Aldershot that some people had actually bussed themselves into Aldershot. They were not locals who were doing some of these counter-protests. We can go... You can see, I think that's like an anarchist flag. This is in Walthamstow, where there's a lot of Palestinian flags doing the rounds as well, all right? And that is a common theme here. So, Harry, I will finally bring you in now, my good man. I just wanted to bring people those fresh clips. These counter-protests that we're seeing here, really, I mean, is this all anti-fascism? Is it anti... Or is it just the same lot that turn up everywhere?
Well, do you know what? It's really interesting because I have a social media interest in Twitter. I've got a fair few followers, I guess. And I get a real mix. I had an ex-superintendent, not of mine, but someone I know and who I respected. And he said, Harry, in your interviews, you're coming across a bit racist. And, you know, and I was really surprised at what I thought was really old-fashioned view when the huge majority from very ordinary men and women who are in the police, who are out of the police, who've never been in the police, were like, I think you've got it spot on. You're reflecting exactly what the issues are, and it's not a black and white. They're fascist. They're bigoted left people. You know, they're. I don't know what. You know, these flags. If it's not Britain, what are they doing there? For goodness' sake, we've got enough problems in Britain.
Well, the irony is, Harry, sorry to bring it up to you, but if someone had walked through that crowd tonight with a Union Jack, they quite possibly would have got lynched, wouldn't they?
Well, exactly, and I believe that the great majority of people out there are decent, ordinary members of public who are accused or feel fear of being called racist, and they're not in the slightest, but they drive past, you know, these plumbers and these electricians drive past huge, you know, hotels more and more every day with asylum seekers in their tracksuits and their mobile phones, and they just think, well, I can't afford to pay my heating and my mortgage, and I'm paying for them, and there doesn't seem to be any plan. And I think that's the key thing. There's no plan to deal with it, and I don't think just illegal immigration. I think legal immigration is far too much of it.
I'd like to just zone in a little bit on the police's actual response to all of this. So we've seen massive amounts of police presence right across the country today. People bracing for what was supposed to be a night of far-right trouble. OK. Do you think there are going to have to be some question marks maybe asked about the intelligence that led up to that in the cold light of day tomorrow, if, fingers crossed, we continue to see no major far-right flashpoints anywhere? And also, how do the police feel, do you think, on the scenes of this unrest at the moment?
I think it'd be really interesting to know what substance there was to intel. I mean, I got intel myself and asked, how do I pass this information on? I've heard there's going to be a big riot happening in so-and-so. So I said, well, Crime Stoppers, or just email 101 so you're not on a phone for hours on end. And how many of those are going around and therefore being put up as intel to say there could be potential problems? And the police are having to be all places at once, and they're exhausted, of course. And so thank goodness it hasn't materialised. I think, yes, there possibly is a bit of underhandedness. And there is, there's lots of people turned up with exactly the same placards. And it's all very lovely. But there is a divide in this country. And that's what the police are trying to have to sort out. They're exhausted. They've basically been fighting for days on end. I think that protesters who are being described as far right mainly are just youngish or middle-aged drunken yobs who just want an excuse to beat authority, and they're not far right at all. In fact, I think we've lost the identity of what that word means now. Those two words mean. It's a bit like racist. They're thrown away round willy-nilly. So I think the police are very happy to have a bit of a breather. It is the prison sentences, I'm sure, will have put off time to take things in. And I think they realise that nobody's on the side of the rioters, even those who are against immigration, believe it or not. Shock and horror. And so I think the energy of that is dying. Maybe the weather as well. I don't know about you in the southwest. It was clouding. It's a bit cooler. It's a lot to do with the weather. Hopefully this has subsided, but the problems still remain.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few business owners that we're seeing at the moment on social media that are a little bit miffed, actually, to say the least. I think everybody did want, it's better to err on the side of caution. We cannot have a pop at the police for when we think they underreact at times. If, you've got a situation like this where maybe in the cold light of day they may have been considered to have overreacted in terms of a police presence. We don't know, but there are some businesses on social media at the moment that are asking, what was the intelligence that we were seriously actually going to have a genuine far-right threat here? Because we've boarded up our shops, we've shut down for the day, and it has cost people money. But look, Harry, thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, my good man, but I'll talk to you again very, very soon. Thank you very much. Sorry, Tangi, there's a former police armed response sergeant. Now, as we saw earlier on, 8 people have been arrested following disorder in Croydon on Wednesday evening. That was today. The Met Police said that the disruption is not linked to the protest. They thought it was just antisocial behaviour. I'll show you another clip of that later on. But coming up, I've got a brand new and exclusive poll for you on who the Tory grassroots want as their next leader. But before that, it's all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, so stay tuned.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade. And then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies. Temperatures, certainly in rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers. But for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many, Friday's set fair, a much brighter day for Wales and southwest England for sure, with some good spells of sunshine and a fresher feel. Showery rain on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again as we go through the weekend.
weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I've got the front pages for you, so let's do it. All right, so the Metro leads with Putin's pawns stoking riots. Russians are targeting UK far-right channels, apparently. There we go. We have heard that rather a lot in the past, haven't we? But The Independent goes with the full force of the law. So this is the three men who were sent to prison for more than 7 years in total, excuse me, over the riots in Southport. One got 3 years, one got 30 months, one got 20 months. So long sentences, I suppose, in relation to the crimes, maybe. The Eye, far-right rioters face football ban as ministers bid to curb the unrest. So basically, yeah, rioters involved in violence, the quote-unquote far-right rioters, could be barred from football matches as police probe links with hooliganism. It's fair to say, look, so far tonight, the police will not have had a huge amount of far-right to probe, actually, but not to say that there hasn't been any, of course. The Times, thousands take to the streets to confront the far right. Police warn of 100 clashes across England. Rioters handed sentences of up to 3 years, and they've got the big picture there of Walthamstow, where supposedly about 10,000 people turned out. Look, interesting headline this from the Daily Mail, and, you know, one that I'm not sure how well this will go down with their readers, but, you know, we'll see. The night that anti-hate marchers faced down the thugs. Now, it's really interesting, this, because there's a massive crossover on some of these marches, as we've evidenced with video so far on the show tonight, of, you know, some of the pro-Palestine lot, some of the kind of anarchist lot with the flags there. You know, all of it. Is it fair to say that they're anti-hate marchers? And is it fair to say that they actually faced down the thugs that, as far as we're aware, in pretty much every single area, didn't turn up?
The Daily Mail is saying it. Yeah. Do we have to be more right-wing than the Daily Mail? Can't we say that's a reasonable level of right-wing?
Look, I mean, I'm
That's
just
not
not
a
sure it's
typical
really
Mail headline.
accurate. You know,
It's not a typical Mail headline, is it?
I don't know. Well, hey, look, you know, there we go. What is right is that thousands, tens of thousands of people did turn out tonight, and you know, they were obviously, you know, ready for, you know, what we were told, pumped full of fear all day, weren't we? We were going to get these 100 riots. But anyway, so, look, a bit of an exclusive for you, I think it is anyway. Robert Jenrick, who's leading the way amongst the grassroots of the Tory members in the fight to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. So, Popular Conservatism's first opinion poll has him ahead on 24%, just ahead of fellow frontrunners Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel on 23% and 21% respectively. The polling also revealed that 86% of Tory members want out of the ECHR, 78% want to scrap net zero, and interestingly, more than three-quarters think the next Conservative leader should warmly welcome Reform UK members and parliamentarians into the party. Mark, this is your stuff.
It is. So, yeah, Patrick, we've set up a panel of around about 500 or so Conservative Party members. It's a straw poll. There's still an awful long way to go. But I guess, you know, the bookmakers seem to be about right at the moment. Interestingly, Priti Patel seems to be very, very close as well. So there's three of them who seem to all have similar levels of support in terms of the leadership. Of course, what actually happens in the leadership race is the MPs themselves are going to whittle this down to 2 out of 6, and only then will the party membership actually have a say. But it seems pretty clear to me that whoever is going to prevail, and I strongly suspect it will be one of these three, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch or Priti Patel, are going to have to address a lot of concerns of Conservative Party grassroots members, just as you've said, because ultimately the decision rests with the membership.
Well, Robert Jenrick is the front runner in this particular poll, and I'm going to play a clip now, and I'll get you to react off it, Adam, and then you, Rebecca. So this is Robert Jenrick, which has caused quite a lot of controversy earlier on.
You know, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 to 9
Akbar
days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested or...
I mean, he put a bit of context out after that, showed a clip of people running through Bolton with masks on, shouting Allahu Akbar, and he said that was intimidating. Adam, do you think it's right he's been called Islamophobic?
I think it was very clumsy what he said and how he said it. I think there is intimidation tactics being deployed there. You know, if they feel their backs are to the wall, they're showing this is who we are. I think the way he said it was pretty wrong, really clumsy. But for me, I've said his leadership material before, but out of the three, for me, Priti Patel seems the stronger, more conservative out of them all. I mean, Kemi worries me because of her links to Michael Gove. I think Priti Patel is more of a sort of iron lady that people are craving from a Conservative Party, to be fair.
Rebecca, do you think that this quotes-unquote Islamophobia issue now that has blown up around Robert Jenrick is going to impact him when it comes to his chances of being the next Tory leader?
No, I think the people who can vote for it will like it. I think it does come across pretty Islamophobic. I think it was a misstep. I don't think he actually meant to be racist. Yeah. It sounds racist, but it doesn't. I think if I was shouting I love Taylor Swift in the street in people's faces, it could be intimidating. That not anything you scream in someone's face is wrong. But no, I think the kind of people who are going to be voting for this probably would be quite happy to hear him. People like unfiltered speech. People like people who aren't afraid to say what they think. We've seen people like Donald Trump be rewarded for that. I think also it might be used as a kind of dog whistle that he's not afraid to speak out about issues, particularly to do with immigration. So I think it'll probably make him more popular, not less.
It was, I agree with both of you, actually. I think it was a little bit clumsy from Robert Jenrick, but I don't think it will harm him at all. And I think generally in politics, on both sides of the aisle, we're a bit sick and tired of politicians who think twice before saying nothing. And I would rather have politicians of all stripes actually saying, look, I basically think this, even if they then need to clarify a bit later that they overstepped the mark or weren't sufficiently nuanced. And Robert Jenrick did actually clarify that later in a tweet. And certainly within the Conservative race, I think being bold and outspoken, not full-blown Trump, but at least saying, look, this is basically what I think.
I would say, though, I do think it's
going to be vital for the winner.
I think it's really important to remember that Twitter isn't real life and that only a vanishingly small number of people in this country use Twitter. So putting out a follow-up statement on Twitter is only speaking to a tiny, quite metropolitan, but by tiny degrees to who heard it the first time. Right, so this idea that you can just say whatever you want and then
is to clarify it.
Sure,
and he didn't double down. He clarified.
Sure, but I don't think we should move towards a model where politicians just say things and then put a statement on Twitter because Twitter isn't real. No, it doesn't really matter.
You clarify your position in public.
I think people got the gist. I think people got the gist of what he was saying, and I think that there are times. I mean, we've played clips of it already tonight. We've not got time to do it again right now. But where I think people in balaclavas running through the street, sometimes with weapons visible, who happen to be shouting Allahu Akbar. I do think it's perfectly reasonable to say that in that context...
But a visible weapon is the issue there. If somebody's running around with a visible weapon, it doesn't matter what they're shouting, they have a weapon.
And the group...
A balaclava is a hat, a weapon is a weapon. Right. The problem there is the weapon.
I think you potentially being a little... If you take the politics out of it, and you take everyone out of it, and you put yourself in the position of being a little old lady who's walking to the shops, and those people run past you shouting that, it is not the phrase that they're saying God is great, it's part of the wider context.
And to be fair, if anyone, whether they be white, black or brown, with a balaclava run past shouting anything, that little old lady would be intimidated. And so would most people, Patrick.
And of course, this phrase has actually been associated with egregious terrorist attacks. Usually it's said very peacefully and softly, whereas I don't think Rebecca screaming that she loves Taylor Swift has ever been associated with any violent behaviour.
Except that neatly dovetails into what we're going to discuss in a minute.
It does. Right, now, look, OK, coming up. Do you consider Elon Musk to be an honorary Greatest Britain or Union jackass? The panel are going to scrap that one out in a moment. But next, I've got more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you. Stay tuned.
This is GB News. Britain's news channel.
Esther, can we talk about Andy Murray? Because Andy Murray has retired, which is great news. And in the papers today, his lovely wife, Kim, said, this is good, I'm glad he's retired because he can do some childcare now and a bit of housework. But you know all about relationships. Yes. This is going to be an adjustment for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, as a father and a husband as well, Mark, that when you are at home, you are actually a big pain in the... Because you are kind of wired and you want to be doing stuff. And Andy Murray's like goal-driven. Can you imagine? He's going to be like, I'm going to make chili con carne. I'm going to make chili like this and this. And, you know, he's going to be like so focused and he's going to have so much energy. I would be terrified to live in the same house as Andy Murray. I know he kind of comes across as quite laid back, you know. He's a bit of a Sean Connery.
But actually, these people are driven, and that's not going to stop just because he's retired, right?
OK, when you've got a driven parent and the parent is at home, they're a nightmare. Yeah. So he needs to be seriously occupied. We've got to think of some hobbies.
Isn't it Kim's turn?
To have her career?
For her to be the most important person in the house.
I think she's quite into her art and painting and things like that.
So isn't it time for him to stay at home, you know, feed the kids and all that, empty the dishwasher, and let her career be the most important?
Although I doubt he'll do that. He'll have so much other stuff to do. Punditry. Maybe he'll join his mum. She has a tennis academy.
Actually, I remember there's a documentary about both of them have a hotel in Scotland. Actually, I think they co-run and I think they refurbished it. Yeah. To be fair, you know, Kim, you know, not just the hotel, but I'm sure she'll have other business ventures. You're right. I think it's the right thing to do. Clearly, you know, Andy Murray has had to be out the house. You know, probably she's had to look after the kids. I think anyone that's at the top of their game when they retire, I think the only fair thing to do is to, as you say, maybe take a step back and support your wife.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I've got more front pages for you now. So we're going to start this particular round of them with The Guardian. Thousands take to the streets to counter the threat from the far right. Yep, OK, there is a theme here on the front pages. Now, this is an interesting one in The Telegraph. Britain shuts up shop over riots threat. MPs were urged to work from home. GPs closed. Can I just say, that's not a shock, is it? That GPs was probably boarded up weeks ago. But anyway, businesses boarded up as well to avoid the disaster. Disorder. And Daily Express, United Britain stands firm against thugs. OK. Look, I'm just going to touch on this one quickly. Do we think... Adam, I'll start with you on this. Do you think that there's the potential that the police... and our politicians might have a little bit to answer for tomorrow morning?
Yeah, it sounds like the intelligence was rubbish or non-existent, really, on this. And as a business owner, those poor businesses have lost out a lot of money today. And times are hard. The economy is not great. Small businesses are suffering. That's not going to help. So, again, I condemn all riots, of course, all violence, whether it's from the left, the right, or whoever. Those businesses suffer today.
I suppose the thing we'll never know, Rebecca, isn't it, is had it not been for the lengthy sentences handed out earlier today, the police present, you know, the people out on the streets like we saw in Walters, etc., whether or not actually the far right ever intended to turn up. We'll never know that, will we?
But there isn't like a far right council where they all vote on stuff. Like it catches a moment or a wave, and I think people have seen. I don't want to go to prison for looting some Crocs. I don't want to go to prison for stealing a bag of rice. Things that have happened to people in the past. People are having the cold light of day. But I would say I don't like the suggestion that's an overreaction. Like, earlier this week, I had a babysitter who's a hijabi, and she said to me, she was like, I genuinely am not leaving the house because I've had friends who, like, in Streatham, someone tried to pull someone's headscarf off this week. Like, things are scary, and people like my friends who are not white are actively frightened. People who are not victims, who don't usually talk like that. So I think to suggest that people are being overreactive is maybe to misunderstand quite how frightening it is to be a person of colour this week.
Do you think that at some point maybe the police have to, you know, reveal the exact intelligence? Because if it was just, I'm sure it wasn't this, but if it was just the telegram messages that were doing the rounds, yeah, obviously you have to be super cautious there, but... I don't know. It's a difficult one to say.
Here's a theory, Patrick. I do wonder, and often I've been on your show saying that we need decent justice but swift justice. And just speculating here, just a theory, but are these three guys who've gone down in Southport, this was at least done quickly, swiftly, they've got tough jail sentences. Now, I don't know what goes through the mind of some far-right winger on Telegram or Twitter, but perhaps that has actually worked as a deterrent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Maybe, you know, shock horror, actually, yeah, swift justice and
banging people up does actually work.
Are there bad actors on Telegram revving it up for their own agenda? We don't know. I mean, I've never been on Telegram, so I don't know how it works.
And also, I don't want to diminish some of the absolute filth that was out.
Yeah, I would say predominantly it is just bad people doing bad things for the reasons we understand them to have done them.
Right, look, I've got a couple of stories. Right, it's shift in tone, all right? Thank goodness for this. So, the King's Guard and their horses, which guard our royal palaces, have developed a bit of a reputation for reining in unruly tourists. But this week, a heartwarming clip was filmed outside St James's Palace in central London, showing the softer side to the King's Guard. Watch as this horse is encouraged to approach a young, disabled person, and their presence clearly made her day. Oh, I just find that really touching, actually. That's really sweet. Now to a... You're laughing at me.
Your happy little face.
I think that's really nice.
I'm just pleased the horse didn't do anything really
can you
bad.
imagine if differently what happens next? And you're like, not that, all right, not that.
That's the happiest I've ever seen you.
Yeah, no, it's been a heavy...
Tiny piece of good news at last.
Yeah. Right now, quickly, to a trend that is taking off on TikTok. Let me introduce you to doggy pampering. Social media is awash with videos of dogs being treated to spa days with their owners. A whopping 1.2 billion videos under Dog Spa are available. Further 8.5 million videos for Spa Day with my dog. That's just on TikTok. Posts are meant to provide a relaxing treatment day for dogs. Experts warn, though, that it's important to keep your pet safe when doing so. That dog is currently having its paws Vaseline. That one's got a bow on. So there we are. People are now treating their dogs to spa days. Right, I would ask if it's cute or barking mad, but we haven't really got time, so we're going to go straight into Greatest Britain, Union Jackass, please. We're going to have to be relatively quick with this. Mark, Greatest Britain.
Jonathan Hayes, hero of the whole Southport disaster, tragedy, but spoke brilliantly on Radio 4 this morning in a very calm, measured way, saying we genuinely need to open up the debate about immigration in a proper and sensible fashion.
Good start. Adam.
Honorary nomination is Elon Musk for holding Keir Starmer to account.
Yeah, fair enough. And he believes he's got an interview with Trump at some point, hasn't he, soon? So that'll be interesting. Go on, Becca.
Mine is Tim Walz, who is... I was about to say President Harris, wishful thinking. Kamala Harris's running mate. When he was in charge of Minnesota, he codified abortion legislation, he got free meals in schools, and he granted 20 weeks paid family leave for all families.
OK.
He's a nice man.
We are, to be fair, one way or the other, we're about to start learning a hell of a lot more about Tim Walz, aren't we? But, right, guys, today's winner of the Greatest Britain is Jonathan Hayes, who spoke out earlier after the, after being a hero, really, in that Southport incident. Let's whiz ourselves on now to Union Jackass.
Peter Jukes, the left-wing journalist from Byline Times, who today compared Elon Musk's ownership of Twitter to be equivalent to the Nazi occupation of Paris. I mean, ludicrous over-exaggeration, to put it mildly.
OK, all right, Adam.
Mine is Superintendent Emlyn Richards for his car crash Sky News interview that basically many are using as evidence of two-tier policing.
Yeah, but definitely. We played a clip of that a bit earlier on. Rebecca?
Mine is the ultimate trump card, ISIS. Specifically because they have had to... The government have cancelled 3 Taylor Swift concerts in Austria because they were planning an active terror attack on a Taylor Swift concert in the manner of the Ariana Grande attacks in Manchester, which is genuinely horrific. Like, thousands of predominantly women and children could have been... Yeah, well, adults go too, Patrick.
Sorry.
But, yes, it's an attack on women, basically, and it's horrific.
Yeah, 100%.
An attempted attack.
Well, in light of that, then the Union Jackass is obviously Peter Jukes. No, it's not. It's not. It is, of course, ISIS. Yeah, and I think what you've managed to do there, Rebecca, is load the dice somewhat.
Yeah, a little bit. I cheated and I got to talk about Taylor Swift, so I'm happy.
But that is, by the way, on a genuinely very serious note now, that is probably a story that we're going to talk about quite a bit tomorrow, I think, because, yes, there's 2 or 3 Taylor Swift concerts that have had to be cancelled.
All 3 have been cancelled by the Austrian authorities.
ISIS. So there we go. There's more expected in London in August, so hopefully they don't get cancelled. Right, yeah, Taylor Swift shows, not ISIS attacks. Anyway, you know what? It's been a long day. Right, thank you to everyone. I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care. Headliners next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow's going to feel pretty warm and humid, and after a dry start for many, it's going to turn dull, with quite a few of us seeing outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Not from this area of low pressure, but actually from this rather innocuous-looking set of weather fronts. The low to the north, though, is still providing some hefty showers across northern Scotland. Still pretty gusty here as well. A blustery night across the far north. Elsewhere, the winds are easing. There'll be some clearer spells. A few showers across northern England, but they're tending to fade. And then we'll see the cloud, rain and drizzle spilling into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. Quite a warm night here. Elsewhere, with some clearer skies. Temperatures, certainly rural spots, could dip down to single figures. So for many, it is a bright start to Thursday. There'll be some sunshine around. Still quite gusty across the far north of Scotland with a few showers, but for much of Scotland, looking drier tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. Will cloud over across the southwest as the cloud and rain spills into northwest England and parts of the south of Northern Ireland. A very different day for Wales and southwest England tomorrow. A lot of cloud, rain and drizzle on and off for much of the day, particularly over hills and around the coast. Whereas the Midlands and eastern England, after a dry, fine start, will just steadily cloud over. Rain trickling into parts of the Midlands, spreading across more northern parts of England. Some heavier bursts of rain possible later in the day. Not much rain for East Anglia in the southeast, just turning cloudy here, and the far northeast of Scotland also mostly dry. Temperatures 19, 20, maybe a little higher in the southeast. It is going to feel really quite warm and humid, however. The rain and drizzle will be still across the south early on Friday, but it should scoot away. Showers in the northwest, but for many.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a